Okay, good evening, everybody. Wow. Lots of people. It's completely fantastic. Happy New Year. Welcome back. Welcome to Rudolph Hall and Hastings Hall for the inaugural lecture of the spring semester. And tonight I am delighted to introduce our speaker, Bjarne Mastenbroek, who is with us from Amsterdam. He joins us to teach an atypical, only atypical in that it is being offered in the spring semester, Bass Advanced Studio, along with developer Isaac Kallisvaart, architect Eric Coe, and senior critic Andre Harwell. The Bass Fellowship was made possible, as many of you know, by a generous gift from Ed Bass, a 1968 graduate of Yale College, and a member of the class of '72 from the School of Architecture. He was also a member of the Yale Corporation for 14 years, and he has continued his involvement at the university, helping to steward and expand our extraordinary collection of buildings across the campus. Since graduating from Yale, Ed Bass has focused his professional life on two important issues, the environment and the city. And as such, it is particularly appropriate that Bjarne is with us tonight. He is the founder of Search, an Amsterdam-based architecture and urbanism firm. Since 2002, Search's work has been guided by the idea that there should be an intimate and reciprocal relationship between architecture and site. They have undertaken a wide range of projects, from housing to hotels to libraries, and are leaders in the timber revolution, innovatively using wood construction techniques to pioneer, methods of sustainable design and construction. Mastenbroek's work has received wide recognition, including the 2007 Aga Khan Award with collaborator Dick van Gameren for the Dutch Embassy in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, the 2015 Archdale Building of the Year Award for the Iceberg Housing Complex in Aarhus, Sweden, and the Chicago Athenaeum's Green Good Design Award 3 times, 2010, 13, and 19. Mastenbroek was also named Dutch Architect of the Year in 2009 and chaired the Dutch Association of Architects in 2010 and 11. Tonight, he will be giving a lecture entitled Dig It, with an exclamation mark, Building Bound to the Ground. It's based on his book of the same title, published by Taschen in 2021, illustrated with drawings by Search and photographs by Ewan Bond. His talk will examine the history of how architecture has merged building and ground and how structures can function as landscapes that fit into a site without dominating or disturbing it. So it is with great pleasure that we welcome Bjarne Mastenbroek to Rudolph Hall and to the Yale School of Architecture. Please give him a warm welcome.
Well, that was very nice to hear this. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange lecture maybe, because what I'm going to talk about is indeed, I hear some echo. You also do? It started with a moment that the first winter I spent my holidays in a house that I built in the mountains, and this sort of exploded over the internet. Internet exploded, or became bigger and bigger, and I really didn't know what happened. I was like, what is this? Why is this so widely shared, and what happens here? There was a lot of emotional reactions to the house, and I wanted to sort of research what happened. At the same time, we also finished this forest tower in the center of Holland, which is more for educational purposes. From here you can see the treetops of the tallest trees in Holland. Please don't laugh, it's only 40 meters. Everything is bigger here. Yeah, they are, by the way, sequoias, but they can't grow higher there because it's not humid enough. So we had these two projects that are extremely diverse, into the sky and into the mountain. So we had this first idea of making something about it. So I said, I'm going to do a research that ended 11 years later in a book called Dig It. And To be honest, I'm not a writer, I'm not an academic, so it's maybe more of a struggle than a book, as you could say, a printed struggle to analyze, to find out what are the deepest emotions, why we build, because building is very much a derivative. It's always, even to the second or third degree. There's so much more to building that it's not just a product. It separates itself from anything else we do, I found out. Come back to that later. It is in fact sort of an essay that traces the history of humanity to better understand the relationship between the built environment and site. That's actually what I did. And I had some projects, I knew what I wanted to show, but I didn't know how to sort of organize it. The biggest struggle was organizing it. That took me 4 or 5 years. A lot of attempts didn't work out, and then I started to look into historical projects. I went back and back and back, and then I said, I'm going to write an essay. I overestimated myself a bit, doing that in half a year, which took me about 3 years. And then in the end, I had this idea of 6 topics, and I organized it in the essay at first from the most archaic, simplest acts of building or protection to increasingly more advanced ways of working, in which, through increasing human intelligence and knowledge, more and more order, rule, and complex systems emerged in building, in urban planning and architecture. Talking about complexity, all the formalities to be able to work in the US, that's complexity in a way. You see, the world is extremely complex nowadays. That, of course, wasn't like that. That was organized along an essay with chapters, and then I found 6 topics, I come back to that later, that organizes the projects I sort of wanted to analyze, and I also like to explain the work we do ourselves in the office. And it started, as you see, Villa Vals is not a grotto at all, but of course it is some, people see it as a grotto very much, but it's much more than, it's more of a comforting place in a hillside. But the grotto was more or less the first way for prehistoric people to just hide, to protect from weatherly conditions or from animals or whatever. Or people were climbing in trees and building. So this is total coincidence, almost like the Villa Vals that you just saw, or the Forest Tower. It's up or down, you could say. And until that time, about 200, 300,000 years ago, prehistoric mankind was always stuck to the crust of the earth, foraging, hunter-gatherer, trying to organize, not yet in a way. But how did that happen? And I found out that it seems that the first buildings, the first signs of buildings, some 11,000 years ago, constructions, from feces or from mud or from branches. Most of what was built in wood is gone, but some other stuff in stones is still there. That it was not about shelter, it was about ritualization. So there was already a sense of gathering, it turns out. Here you see some of these examples that they have dug up. We're talking about 11,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago. So it wasn't clearly like the first constructions of housing was there. At least they haven't found that. What later happened was, of course, the domestication of nature through going from hunter-gatherer to a farmer. But it wasn't a clear process. It wasn't a clear transition. It turned out that storing food at that moment seems to be more important than sheltering or housing primitive man. That didn't happen so much. So they have found storage systems, but they haven't found a lot of, let's say, housing, you could say. And then shelters became more of sheds, what you see happening. But those sheds were very sort of multifunctional. They were for the burial of death, the storing of food, because agriculture was sort of coming, but hunter-gatherer was still there. It was not just a clear transition. It happened over 6,000-7,000 years, back and forth. So it was burial of people, dead people often under benches, storing food. It was ritual, and it was also shelter. And you could say this is the very, very first drawing they have found, the oldest drawing they have found of Cataluyuk, which looks like urbanization. There isn't an earlier drawing of urbanization, which is quite amazing. It is almost, as you see here, by the way, here. Is this, it moves, oh no, okay, fine. This is in the Dogon Valley, where you see still the houses that were roughly like the houses from Cataluyuk. They didn't have streets. They were just put together, and through roofs you came into the house. In Dogon it's a bit of a hybrid. Sometimes you have doors on the side, but a lot of stuff happens over the roofs. So, and the book made together with Ivan. Ivan was sort of my traveling photographer. He went over the world. He traveled it, I think, like he spinned around 7 times when I was still at home making drawings with my collaborators and writing. Also thinking it's better, sort of jealous sometimes, of course, because I thought better not fly with him. Let's stay home. I'm going to do this. Raising some kids as well. So it's okay to stay home. I'll do this. He did that. And he always came, and that was the most amazing time for 5 years, that he came to Amsterdam 3-4 times a year. And then we sat down and he showed me all the pictures that he made from the research we did. We sent them out and he showed me the pictures. That was also like the biggest gift I had 4 times a year, to see what he had. Here, for example, you see photos of this Dogon area that he also made within other projects. So this is sort of a byproduct, but many other projects were just photographed while he was, for example, in China or South America. And then he did a travel extra to photograph some projects. But it's quite amazing to see this community still working more or less as this Cataluyuk 11,000 years ago, where most of it goes over the roofs. People dry food, they're protected from animals, and this concept of not having streets but using this double layer, I find very interesting in a way. Sometimes I skip simply in this whole idea a millennium or 2, but it's just a very rough, and it's also not linear, it's not chronological. Most of the changes that happened in the world. Sometimes things happened at 20, 30 different places in the world simultaneously, and sometimes it was a hybrid for 1,000, 2,000 years, it turned out. I was quite surprised to see that. It went very, very, very slow in a way. But as it moved on, you saw that compounds became more communities. Because of language, speech, writing started. So organization of life became more complex. And you saw the rituals became also more complex, and there were power systems, so buildings became bigger, became more important. Quite interesting, for example, to see the first ziggurats and the Babylonic buildings, etc. And religion kicked in, of course, very much. So power systems, religion, etc. Ritualization is something else as religion, in a way, with a very big hierarchy. So there were also the first clear separation from nature, mankind and nature, becoming dominant and changing from ritual to divine worship. Dominant empires, Egyptians, Greek, Roman. There's more than enough to tell, of course, of this. And you saw that while this happened, it also became that nature was seen as more chaotic and mankind as logic, which is, I think some people say it was the biggest misunderstanding of humanity. Others say, no, that even started earlier, at the beginning of agriculture, which is a big misunderstanding because that separates us from nature, also from Earth. It is a cleansing of a natural system. Skip fast forward and you come to a way more complex modern mankind creating societies, clear migration, power systems, etc. We're talking after the Egyptian, Greek, Roman eras, etc. And what you see is in these Middle East fortifications that with attack and war, etc., you had keeps and mounds and all kinds of amazing structures that did a lot for building forms. First of all, they were always high because there was no gunpowder. Later on, gunpowder came and they lowered walls. They were not higher, but they spread out because they wanted to get rid of the distance that they could overthrow with gunpowder. Quite amazing to see. You see control of people, etc. And here you see, for example, the Castle of Dover, where all these elements came together. How to protect, how to stay alive, how to keep the power. Amazing systems, for example, under the grounds of the Castle of Dover and the limestone, where they had all these big tunnels from where they could shoot. Again, fast forward is also what you see around 15th, 16th, 17th century. Public space when the focus shifted more to the private. Life was mainly public, and what you saw also is that the nowadays dominant corridor that connects rooms did not exist really. You went from room to room. And this public space became more private. What you see is that buildings also, they separated themselves from public life. First of all, it was like one porche with little openings in it. It became like a freestanding building in a couple of centuries. Then I'm talking about the dominance of the freestanding building, where Palladio, of course, is with the Villa Rotonda, is like the clear object in a free space, where first of all in the cities it was castles and buildings and hotels and that had communal walls. Often all four walls were communal, and then you had courtyards that were sort of separated out. Well, the Palladio, the Villa Rotonda is of course exactly the opposite of this. That evolved again, and we move into 19th, 20th century, where you have these ideas of the modern city, the city in the garden. This beautiful little drawing of Cedric Price, where you see, let's say, the boiled egg with this very clear center, and then you have the fried egg that is more spread out, becoming the scrambled egg, which is the little chunks of egg yolk in an open space. Beautiful that it is sort of depicted like that. Which of course is very easily told by the first sections of the Unité buildings. The machine in the free landscape. You could say completely separated above a natural landscape was the built form of mankind. And what I came up with, which is a bit of, I sort of build it up to a certain moment that had to do with also a moment in time, 1964, which is the only year that growth rate was above 2%, maybe 63, 2.001 as well, but 64 was the highest growth rate of mankind ever. Since that it declined. And I think, I took 64 simply because I was born in 64, but it is of course about this. I found out this era from, you could say, 62 till 69, first attempt to the moon, till landing on the moon. And all those kind of moments where Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, and we found out that we were killing nature and thereby killing ourselves. Or the amazing films of Jacques Tati. You could say a lot happened. as you see also in this picture, very beautifully, for example, the 3 movies by Tati, Jour de Fête, Mon Oncle, and Playtime, that ridiculized modern life, where you could see, first of all, the postman that couldn't cope with all the modernization and wanted to cycle faster and faster. But that didn't help, of course. And Mon Oncle, this uncle that walked almost like a military in this modern villa of his family. In Playtime, the film that made him bankrupt. You see all the buildings there that looks like a modern city were scaffolding with paintings on it. Quite strange, because he could have filmed it perfectly in Stockholm. And also quite amazing is that those films were almost silent, because the main character in the films of Tati almost doesn't speak a few words. So it was amazing how he sort of felt what was happening at that time. And there was much more, of course. We found out that in China you could, with a lot of people, you could cleanse the earth in a year time. The Dust Bowl period just happened in the United States two decades before that. We found out that things went wrong. And we, of course, went to the moon, and we could see ourselves from a distance. So I think it was a very important moment in history that we still haven't processed at all, in a way. And in fact, we are about beginning to process it now. How can we solve, let's say, the problematic relationship we have with Earth? So that's 1964. It's quite a thing for me, I must say. The day after tomorrow I will turn 60. This photo, I'm very happy that I was able to buy it, to purchase it on an auction a couple of years ago, which is the very, very first series of color picture of the globe, of the blue marble, as they say. We didn't land on the moon yet, but they made this photograph, which is, in fact, it's a television image, because it's 2,400 lines build up to a photo. And it is hanging in it's a very small picture, and I am absolutely in love with it. It tells me so much about how small we are and how much we have to do. And it tells me also, coming back to that moment, I show you one little, let me see if that works here now. I could click on the button. Strange. It's now gone. Sorry? Yeah, it was in my screen also first, but now... In a way, this tells it all. The music of Shostakovich in a film by Rappaport, 1963, I think it is. Where a guy in love who's about to blow up the last dacha in the area, somewhere in Cherrytown. And in a way he transcends to another type of life. And at that moment that happened to tens of millions of people on a yearly basis. They left from agricultural, peasant-like life into a completely different way of living, which is, I think, much more, you could almost say, traumatic than it is just moving your house. It's almost the Russian Tati. And look at that daisy, it's quite amazing. I think it's quite an amazing movie. And you see, as you maybe have read, Shostakovich, he hated it. He was very, very negative about his own music. Well, what I talked about, it's amazing what all happened, but also in many ways, everything we make, everything we do. For example, look at transport. This is about a bit more than a century. Nice car. Lighting. From candles to, I mean, have you seen the sphere? I think it cost more than $1 billion, and it has 6 million LED lights. It's much more than light, but let's say in general LED light. That's what happened. In health, how we operate it within 400 years of difference. Famous photo by Thomas Struth, where an operation was done remotely. Can you imagine? Communication. I mean, the telephone, you all know the iPhone, but imagine what is just in the iPhone. It's so obvious, the communication, that they just packed it full with sensors and cameras and whatever. It's all possible. Living. Oh dear. This is about a millennium. That first house. Most of the people nowadays still love that. And they think, fine to me, give me that. So the progress in housing, you could say, which stands for architecture, bit, and the emotions we have to it, not so much has changed. Poundbury, as you see here on the other side, initiative by Charles, the king, the now king, is going back to what we had already centuries ago. So there is, I think, a huge undertow of modernization when it comes to architecture and urban planning. And that has to do with a lot of, so as I said, it's a derivative building to the second or third degree. It seems that we want something, but what we do with it is completely different. We can't free ourselves from what we really want, and we just do something that is in line with all these other systems. It's not like the car, the light, or whatever we make, because it's stuck to the earth. It seems that it is almost in another dimension, and it can't handle the speed of progress of mankind. And I'm just completely stunned about that. I think architecture got stuck. I'm not talking. There are, of course, examples of modern buildings, but it's more the you could say in general what is happening around the globe and how people still live and what their emotions are linked to architecture, gave to me the idea of I need to understand what has happened, and I would like to have tools to deal with that, to sort of reconnect that. So to me, it's still amazing that this house from 1850, if you would put that up for real estate advertising, people would immediately buy it. This is actually what is being built now in Poundbury. And it sells like hell. Blows my mind. These houses are brand new. It's a new thing in Holland, like Tudor style. They sell. But there's also something else, which is about build quality. This is the house I lived in for 30 years, which is built from wood, a little bit of brick. It is in fact completely, circular. It can adapt amazingly. I fell in love with the house, and I sold it last year, and I should not have done that. I still miss it. I miss it tremendously. I renovated it completely, and it is amazingly well built. Here, look at the construction. These are wooden beams. They were transported from South America. By boat, can you imagine? Those beams didn't come from Europe, they came from South America. And they can carry an enormous load. This house I'm living now, it's from 1880. it's flimsy compared to the house I just. The other house is from 1620. This is from 1880. It's built way less sturdy, and this is what they. This house is finished. Huh? In Holland, they call this finished. This is the way you buy it, and I think it's sort of a disgrace. It's cardboard made from concrete. It's not sustainable. It's not circular. So what the hell happened with architecture? Why did we not solve it the way we did transport, lighting, health? I was commissioned, it stopped later on, a new mixed-use building with a casino. I think the main casino room is, for me, a bit like hell on earth. I'll show you in a minute, but this is the boiler room. And I said, why don't you put the roulette tables not here? It's a beautiful room. So you see that architecture is sort of squeezed between installations and technique. So most clients want to have you could say a container that they can do whatever they want inside, and most of the money goes to installations. So so we're sort of squeezed between those two things. So it seems almost becoming irrelevant the way I see architecture, but I think there is a proven relevance that only increases with so many people on Earth, with limited resources, the globe turning against us. We need to do something. And then I think we should not do this, with here, for example, the shed that almost never moves, and the vessel that is already closed forever, and then, I mean, all those lawsuits about the super talls, where elevators shake and sounds move, or quite funny, this Oliver Wainwright with his amazing critics in the Guardian said, "What are you guys smoking?" It seems, as I said, that we are sort of stuck. But we also have something we have to clean a bit, you could say. This is the tar sands. The scale of this is mind-boggling. It is the biggest project on Earth ever, taking into a speed that you can't imagine. And with all social media, with all the communication, it is amazing that the industry hides this from us, can hide this from us easily. We don't want to see it. We don't want to see the millions of cows that are in vast plains in a sort of a dust bowl that are fed, or all the agriculture. It's amazing we don't see it. All the zillions of chickens in sheds. In Holland, 1.5 million animals are killed every year due to fires in sheds, and they don't give a shit because they say, yeah, fireproofing is more expensive than those 1.5 million animals being killed. I think it's quite amazing. You could say this is not the solution as well. Here you see, this amazing building Caracas that was supposed to be a shopping mall, and then it was empty, and now it's sort of almost a torture chamber. It's the prison. It's the worst prison of Venezuela. You see, of course, the low-income people. You see the high-rises. There's also one of these high-rises that urban think tank, they transformed it with people into a high-rise where now squatters live. It's quite amazing. On the other hand, there's also this. This is 10 years ago. This is how many farmers live on the countryside in Spain, in little houses that have no window. I didn't believe it. Friends of mine lived there, and we passed also a few of her neighbors who exactly lived like this. They have no window. They have a fire in the middle. It's not. And then the last real big problem is this. You see the dignity of this woman living in a trailer park. And at the same time, the lower income, vast amount of people on Earth. And at this other end, you see the multi-million-dollar mansion that is, of course, protected with guns against what? So that's why you could say, dig it. I wanted to understand what can we do better, how. And that resulted in, you could say, 6 strategies. It went from buried underground buildings to embedded in a landscape, in a hillside or whatever, or buildings that are on top of a relief, so they absorb the relief of the building. And then it sort of comes out of the ground, and you could say a spiral or a ramp is like a continuation of a landscape. It's quite interesting. You can also have the grotto-like sort of carving out of volume, and in the end you could also mimic nature. You could mimic trees, you could mimic mountains, you could sort of see how that relates to architecture, to many typologies that maybe could have a better quality of outdoor space or of connection or of view or whatever. So it sort of goes from underground to above ground, but the one thing is it deals with the crust of the earth and the manipulation of sight and how sight is connected to those buildings, what it does to it. Starting with Barry, it is about, for example, we analyzed the Yaodongs in China with the amazing footage that Ivan made, where you see this double use of landscape, agriculture, and housing on top, creating very strong communities. By the way, amazing that in the last 10 years, these are Google Earth pictures where you see that all the Yaodongs disappear in a very rapid space. It's now all corrugated steel, what you see, and concrete in those villages. And mind you, those houses are extremely well from a sustainable point of view, because it's very hot in summer there and very cold in winter. And it balances extremely well these underground caves like buildings. Went through Ellora temples. A strategy of how to carve out amazing, you see this rock above your head, which is, by the way, 10-15 meters of floating rock there. I was quite stunned. I also went myself to Lalibela, because we were commissioned the Dutch embassy in Addis Ababa, and we wanted to build as much possible as in local materials, local people, local techniques, and this was for us like a revelation to see this. How this 700-year-old building is still standing perfectly right up. It's carved out with ramps for ceremony, monks live in caves there. I was extremely impressed how this is organized. A ceremonial place, but so incredibly beautiful. I worked for Miralles in Spain for a while, and in part on the Igualada cemetery, some small extensions at that time, because there was no money to keep on building, so it went little piece by piece. By the way, he has worked with this amazing idea of the drawings of Garcia Lorca with the tears and the grave on the ground, which is this embedded idea of in a hillside. Very briefly, Antinori Winery. Go and see it. Amazing how they have gone after 27 generations of Marchesi, the youngest generation. Two sisters said, let's go back to the winery and not stay in Florence in the city. And they built this underground winery, a huge complex like this. And of course, this is what we did. Where we interacted with the landscape, we dug into the hillside and we used an old barn. It was about to be destroyed because they cut up the land in 4 plots. And I said, can you please move the lines a little bit so that I can keep the barn? And they say, no, that's useless. Why should you have a barn for a house? I said, I would like to have it. So we made the barn as an entrance, as you can see here. And from there, through an underground tunnel, it's sort of a beautiful routing that is more romantic, I thought, for a holiday house. And as I said, that exploded in my face and was rented out since then ever. Having a lot of privacy, because it's in the village. Everybody thinks it's outside, somewhere remote. No, it's not. It's next to the thermal baths of Pieterszoom. It's in the village, but you have this amazing privacy and beautiful view of Alp Tomul. And lots of fun, of course. I mean, that's what you do in a holiday house. where the transition from inside and outside is very intimate, and the terrace is becoming part of your house in a way. These strategies of burying we also did with the Novo Nordisk corporate headquarters, the Global Conference Center. There was a big dike 6 meters above the lake, which is an artificial lake, by the way. But we were not allowed to touch the building or extend it to it. So we made it underground, connecting with conference rooms, opening up the dike, overlooking the water. They asked for very specific, different meeting rooms. That's what we did. It was a layout. Also, as you see here, maybe in a very small. It was also a bit of, for me, of a tribute to Enrique Miralles, who died at that suddenly because of brain tumor. Sadly enough. The next strategy, embed, as I said, which is more in a open air hillside level where, let's say, underground and above ground merge in one thing, which very obviously, of course, happens in the ancient theaters. Beautifully laid out, acoustics amazingly. We can learn a lot from that. Or the 4,500 stepped wells in India that most of are now used as trash bins, just filled up with dirt. Some of them are restored. It's becoming a touristic venue, but in a way, in the near future, it would be the place to at least have clean water, because they work, they still work. So we analyzed all these. And you see here, this, the most amazing structures we see there. Or hillside villages that work very intricately with animals downstairs, people upstairs, and then in the level in between you have the routing in front of the houses. Beautiful communities. Almost impossible to go to because you're not allowed to travel there. But luckily we found a stewardess from KLM who secretly went there and made photos. She was a good photographer, and who lent us her images. Which relates a bit to the Dogon and to the, you know, the Catalhuyuk roof typology going in. But this is quite amazing, as you see the roofs here. People gather at twilight on those roofs, and they have ceremonies, and they marry there, they have parties. It's quite amazing. But more recent examples, I think one of the routings through a building by Sterling, I think is quite amazing. The Neue Staatsgalerie. Or a very temporary Bangladesh where you have a lot of floodings, where one simple dike and a leveling out creates a beautiful embedding. We did it in some houses where you see this also of how to relate to the rock or to the difference in level in another way. Where chalets, this house of the famous painter Balthus. I think it's the most gorgeous chalet you can imagine in Switzerland, in the Gruyere. So how can you make a compact house and then at the same time, because nowadays they all build these sort of compounds of little chalets, which I think is quite ugly. I wanted to make it into one building. Garage, the guy drives, is a Porsche race driver, rally driver. Lots of problems with snow. I said, let's do it downstairs and then elevator up. It's a bit of a James Bond house. But it relates to the different levels very much, and that's what I like. So every room you can easily enter by just going up one or two step down or up, as you see here. Sometimes it can be very subtle, the embedding. Like this, very Dutch. What I did was maybe not wise, because I elevated the house, because of flooding, and I lowered one floor, one part of the house, to at least to connect to the garden better, as you see here. It just moves down. It's just the client didn't understand at all why I would make sort of a rolling floor down to the grass, as you see here. He said, well, I can't use those square meters. I said, come on, you have a house of 500 square meters, so those 10 square meters that are a bit, quirky, doesn't matter. quite funny enough is they now love it, because when the dog comes in with wet feet, it's too slippery, so he stays there. He doesn't spoil the house. Or here, a house that was way too big, we convinced the client to make the house half the size, so it's now 3,500 square meters only. I think it's quite ridiculous. We made it more sustainable than he wanted, but not as much as I wanted, but at least can do something. But most of the auxiliary spaces we made underground, so that at least you have some acceptable, I think, site specificness of a huge house for himself. And the only thing that we really sort of designed was the garage with the 20 cars, of course, and the vault with all the strange clients. I don't know if I would like to do that a lot more, to be honest. But it was fun working on the landscaping part of this building, where you have 3 houses, one for the brother, one for himself, one for the guests. As I said, this embedding can be very subtle. Here it's a little house for a lady that works at the biggest bird society in Holland. She's a bird watcher, so we made an almost snake-like house that relates to very different landscapes, although the house is of course fixed. But this snake-like house gives her the possibility to watch the small birds in the woods in the front, to watch the little lake as you see in the top, the bigger birds, the sea eagle even comes here sometimes. The migrating birds in the polder on the left you see, or the somewhat bigger birds in the salt marshes, in the salt. There's some salty kwelder coming out at that area. So how one simple form can relate to very different landscapes was the idea, as you see here. Third strategy, absorb. That is about where let's say the identity of the landscape is sort of pushed inside the building, was our idea, with these beautiful examples of Casa Malaparte, the most gorgeous house. I think it's kind of, most people don't understand the scale of this house, I think, because it's enormous. It's absolutely enormous. But there are gorgeous examples in Brazil, for example, this Costa Brava Club by the brothers Menescal, which is a very brutal building. It is extended 4 times, but this one thing makes it, which is this rock that sort of comes up in the patio towards the main pool. I think it's quite amazing how site-specific and how beautifully it sort of resonates with its stunning landscape. And even the main pool downstairs, the saltwater pool, where the rock is almost like a big whale waiting in that pool. As I said, we did the Dutch embassy, where we try to sort of do what La Libera, but of course you can't carve out an embassy. But at least we try to relate to that and sort of use the relief of the landscape. This is Ethiopia. Well, this is Holland. So we made this beautiful water roof. In the rainy season there's water on the roof, which is the horizontal level of Holland, and then the relief, which is not that much there, is used to separate the residents from the chancellery, and then the ambassador can walk over the roof, a bit like God can walk over water, to his department. And here you see the main corridor in the embassy is a ramp that connects all the rooms, and then at the very end you come out, you go to the roof, you go over, you can go to your house as ambassador. This is the main routing. And what we learned from Ethiopia was amazing, is that if you have limited resources, you reuse everything. I was absolutely stunned by the ingenious way of working, of reusing, etc. And since then we have implemented that in our work. Of course, completely different, but let's work in a different, more efficient way. It's all efficiency, in fact, in Ethiopia. Here we created sort of a very sculptural routing, where the 3 service houses from staff are also in the hillside. So the house has a garden, and the garden is the roof of the next house every time. As you see here, you overlook, you have a beautiful view of the valley. This is your garden, and under that garden is the next house. briefly go to spiral, then and the last one. This is a very interesting topic. Found out that everything is a spiral in life. It's because you have the bulb, you have the mattress you sleep on, the spiral, the ball pen, the electromotor, propelling of whatever, the screw fastening. In architecture, it was a bit lost. You could say you have the Guggenheim, of course, but now there's an enormous resurrection of spiral and of leveling out of buildings. I think it's beautiful to use that richness of possibilities that we sort of analyzed. The countless paintings of the Tower of Babel, the square ones, the round ones, the ruined ones, but the real built ones as well, of course. Or even the castles in France where the horses can spiral up from the riverbed to the main rock. They turn 6 times and then they're 20 meters up. Quite amazing. As I said, spiraling, one of the most beautiful examples to me is the Musée Gallo-Romain by Cefus. Also did the UNESCO building, parts of the UNESCO building. But here next to this amphitheater, some peeping out windows, but inside that hill, is this amazing concrete paperclip formed structure of ramps that tell the story of the Gallo-Roman period. Beautifully laid out with minimal obstructing the beautiful amphitheater. Beautiful examples, of course, temporary. I think Ben van Berkel did here. You and Studio, an amazing job. Talking about the drawings, all 600 drawings in the book are done by my office, and I think this drawing was the most difficult one to make. It took them about 6 weeks, interns, redrawing, until we found a way of making an axonometric or a sectional drawing that immediately tells everything when it comes to the connections. We worked very early on a pavilion, which was a little restaurant burned down. They wanted to have a new pavilion. I thought, let's do something with this idea of the moraine rocks that you see in that part of Holland, that come out of, they were taken by the last ice age to Holland and stayed there. So we used that idea of those rocks and, this sort of move. It's the last, these are our real mountains in Holland. They are 70 meters high. And we, of course, like to emphasize that. In a building that spirals up, and from there out you can see the beautiful landscape in that area. We even did a school, it's a school with 3 different sections, but they want to have the flexibility that one section grows and the other one shrinks. How do you do that in different floors? So we proposed this spiraling school, and the client said, give it a try. Let's see how it works. One day a year they have a competition where children can run down on chairs with wheels, and the fastest one gets the prize. Carving out, well, this is, I think, the building with the worst, division between mass and opening. What I learned is that mass was absolutely necessary to make a span, because in that time we needed the pressure. So you couldn't make light structures that spanned a lot, so you needed mass, of course. Stupid me, but now I understand how it works. And this building was the biggest span for 1700 years. For 1700 years they did not succeed to make a bigger span. Or they used trusses, or they used, the Gothic churches. It was about mass to make a span. That in the end, so the carving out in the end, we got rid of, because we had industrialization, we got steel, and that ended up in buildings that were so light that only needed structures even lighter than trees, and glass that you could look through, ending up in the biggest complex in the world around 1900, with the least amount of material, the most amount of space was done then. And I think there has never been a building. I like that so much. You need an iron steel plate of 6 centimeters thick, which has the same base as the Eiffel Tower, and that's all the steel in the Eiffel Tower. Or to tell it in a different story, if you put the Eiffel Tower in a cylinder of air, the air is heavier than the steel of the Eiffel Tower. We can't build lighter. It was done at that time already. But we are interested in this carving out, in using, vaulted examples of the beautiful buildings in the Piscine Amiro, where not a theater or whatever was in, but this time it was a swimming pool. Because of sanitation, people thought of light and of air and of sanity at that time. They made amazing, beautiful constructions where housing was sort of the mass for another function. As Kaan did. And I'm extremely intrigued by the Kettenroche Dinkelau building, where a piece of nature, you could almost say a park, was incorporated in the cube, becoming a totally different kind of office building before. So this section, I think, is quite amazing. Again, guys, sections are so beautiful to study, to watch, to make also. They explain so much. Well, this example was quite amazing. The silos in South Africa. We used it once for 2 families who wanted to build a house together. One had not so much money, but had the idea. The other one had money and so had a bigger house. But we sort of intertwined them in such a way that one house is in fact a mass for the other house. It creates the voice for the other and vice versa. With an intricate routing in both houses. Or we used for a 100,000 square meter building, the IDOC in Amsterdam, a block. We made a block of 200,000 square meters. Then we started carving out so that it got linked to its urban structure. As you see, I don't know if you can see the lines very well, but to explain to you, it ended up in 5 buildings. That by redirecting those cuts, you could perfectly shape them to a certain amount of square meters, and therefore, as you can see here, creating a beautiful, a huge dip that is in line with the Keizersgracht, so that from the Keizersgracht you don't see this animal lying there, or you link the little street across the small harbor through this building, so that you perfectly see the beautiful Staal Tower from every point in the city still, and not block the view. We carved out a synagogue, a shul room. It's one of the biggest shuls in Western Europe, 1,000 people, 960 people can enter in the shul space, which is due to limited amount of money that we made a very simple shoebox, and in that shoebox formed a beautifully formed oak wood shul room, which forms with the 2 balconies and the eternal light in the top and the main floor, the 7-armed chandelier in a way. That was the idea behind it. So the carving out, as you see also with the Whitney Museum, where urban space is taken away from a solid block, so that you get sort of an interaction, a much more intricate and beautiful interaction between inside and outside, creating an entry that we worked on in the building in Bahrein. This is a building of only 500 square meters, but the site was only 110 square meters. So that's the way we sort of carved a huge block, a bigger block. We carved it back to 110 square meters on ground floor to be able to make it. Last, very briefly, I have 2 little films and then I'm done. The mimic idea of using, what is nature? How does nature evolve? Let's stop the discussion. We are nature, and a building is nature. It's very simple. Everything is nature. But how does it evolve? How can we see the future? How can we use it? It is used very often as an example for architecture, for building, for whatever we made. As you see, Victor Horta, who sort of used almost everything he did was sort of a jungle typology, quite beautiful. And this mimicking also comes. Most of the big inventions come from military, for example, which is military war is an amazing inventor in a way. Sadly enough, it is. And we have always had a crush on mountains, you could say, through history. We wanted to go higher, and we like the mountain idea in general, as you can see. The shells of Sydney Opera. And this amazing plan by Jean Renaudy, which almost dilapidated, it was almost destroyed 15 years ago, and now it's a national monument, I think. It's a great listed building. Beautiful, where you see how a continuation of landscape to all the different levels is made. Study the drawings, by the way, by Jean Renaudy. They are absolutely gorgeous. Ivry-sur-Seine in Paris, where you can walk around to almost the 10th floor. And at a certain moment, it's for me at least, it was completely incomprehensible at what level I was and where I was. The gardens, is it real grass, is it fake grass, where does stand this tree? I liked it very much, this sort of rock typology. Not only that, the layout of the plans are absolutely amazing. Mimicking, Edward P. Bass, he also once tried to mimic something. It's quite amazing what he did and what he tried to do. With 10 or 12 people locking up. It's a sort of it's pre-Big Brother, so locking up in a room in a huge sort of sphere or biosphere, and then see what happens. Well, it faltered completely. It seems, it is clear, we have no clue yet how Earth works. So we need to really be like this, that we may be here, you could say. I showed you this bit, I will not get into this, but I like this idea of sort of multiplying the tree in a built form, by mirroring, by having, there is a forest on top. Can you see it now? Yeah, there is a real forest on top. There is a mirrored forest, and the construction itself is sort of a tree. Or mirroring, as we did here in the financial district of Amsterdam, a sort of rock formation with a huge vaulted entry hall. Because we had to reconfigure office building plots into housing, which is almost impossible because it's way too thick. And what we did is we sort of squeezed it into a rock formation, and therefore were able to build in housing, where at least your balcony is not a repetition of the same, but it's like an open, you have nothing above you, which is, I think, much nicer, and the balcony is much bigger. We used, together with Zebra and EDS, the Iceberg project. I will show a little film, and then I have a film of the last project, which is the hotel, and then we're done. And now I need to try and get to... So in this project, the idea of this iceberg, where there's always 90% underwater and only 10 above, it tells you a lot more than only what you see. But here we used the sort of the coulisse, the different combinations of the pyramids, so that wherever you are in the project you see the sea, although it's layered in 4 levels. It's absolutely amazing what they're doing in Denmark at the moment with harbourfront areas. Last thing, I'm very happy that I won't talk about the wooden projects that we do now for over 50%, 60% of our project. We try to have zero emission buildings, or we not try to, we can make zero emission buildings now, completely circular. The first attempt was this one, and I'm very happy with it. It humbled me also very much, because it's not about iconic buildings, it's not about design so much, it's about making the right decisions to make a special building that really grows on you. As you see here, it spirals up almost from the lower level under the bridge to the bridge level. And last thing is, what I really like in the building is when you enter through the revolving door, you never have to touch one door until you reach your room, because it's all open. It's like a landscape, and that's what makes me work very well. I will show you, and I would say this is the end. Thank you very much.
You know, I've seen a lot of the benefits of going down into the ground that you were displaying. What would you say some of the biggest challenges that you faced going into the landscape have been?
Yeah, that has been asked quite a lot. Does it work?
Oh, yes.
It's not that I'm promoting underground building. It's more that we did a few underground projects, as you have seen, or semi-underground. The funny thing is, starting on the book, or at the very end, making Dig It, I found I could have made this book of 1,400 pages. I could have made 3 issues of only underground. We got so much examples also posted to us and given to us. You have to have this. It's amazing how much underground. Then there are, within city centers, you see that because of densification, 90% of musea extend underground simply because they're in a listed, in a monumental historical context. So they can't build. 90% is done underground. In wineries, you see 90% is underground now. It's like the hot thing to do. A bit in housing, I'm not saying you should do that, but the benefits are, as you see in the Argonne and some other places, that especially in hillsides, that it tempers temperature very much. So in terms of global warming, it can help in several sites dramatically. But I'm not a promoter of let's go, not that.
On the balcony?
Hello, can you hear me? Oh, great. Firstly, I just want to say thank you for the lecture. It was extremely inspiring, and some of the projects you showed were just absolutely gorgeous. I'd like to just quickly go back to the middle part of your lecture where you had showed, different industries and the advancements over time, and just sheer pace after 1964, as you said, where things sped up and you feel that architecture got stuck in some way. And I just wanted to clarify, because I feel that personally I've always felt that the pace of architecture has been somewhat beneficial by being not affected by the exponential growth of other technologies, like for instance iPhone, things like that. And you discussed about climate change and these things, and I do feel that the sheer pace and movement of these industries has contributed. Do you feel that architecture, by being kind of not, I don't want to say stagnant, but not being affected by this level of rapid growth, could also be seen as a benefit?
Yes and no, but what I really want to explain, probably I didn't do that very well, but it seems that we have little understanding of what architecture can mean for us and how we can use it to make a better life. It seems that we do that in a very limited way and connected to sites and to the crust of the earth. But we use the earth most of the time as just a passive foundation. You put it there, you enter the building, that's it. And I think there's a way that history has shown that there is an enormous richness of how much more you can do. And therefore also, I think, have solutions for really pressing problems. And the second thing is, at the moment, architecture has become, building has become, we're not trying to find a roof for people. We're not building to have a roof for people. That's the cynical thing. We now make roofs for money. So we build things because we need to stuff in money. We need to stuff in pension funds. We need to stuff in money so that it can grow. And that is for most of the people, most of the developers, etc. They're interested in the money making. And I sold last year 2 houses. I sold it for an amount that if you had told me that 30 years ago, mind-boggling. It went over like 20 times, and I felt dirty. I didn't like it. It didn't make me happy, because at the same time I understood, okay, but this means my daughters can't find a house. They can't afford a house. I wish that house was worth maybe double. So it's a total, the whole financial element of building is not good. It's absolutely not good. And that's what you see happening now. I mean, less and less people have amazing mansions, and more people have no decent home. And we need to stop that. We need to tweak that into, we need to reconfigure it. We're not going to do it, I know for sure. It's come on, guys. I hope you are the next generation that sort of redirects that. And if you don't redirect it, it will go wrong, I think, because people